It's number 12 in my recordings. This is one of the neatest original stories I think I've ever told. It's almost unbelievable. But years ago, gosh, I guess it's 30 years ago, 35, Shuba's brother was a commanding officer of an army base in Stuttgart, Germany, and 4 or 5 smaller bases around Stuttgart. And Shuba and I and her mother and dad, Frank and Cricket Henderson, the 4 of us flew to Germany to spend 2 weeks with George, and he lived in the big commander's office there in Stuttgart, and we stayed in his home the whole 2 weeks. I remember real close and walking distance to the edge of the base there was this big building with a big 3-star Mercedes emblem up on a big pole turning around and around, and that was the headquarters to Mercedes-Benz, which was next door to where the base was. I remember that. But the story, we took a 2 or 3 day trip in a car when we were there with George and his wife, and went into the Alps and Germany, and I'm trying to think what the other part of the country was in. But anyway, we on the second or third day, we were at a tourist attraction. Was an old German castle that had tours. So at the bottom of it was a long hill up to this castle. There was a concession stand and a little park area, and we stopped and had a drink, a sandwich or something before we went up to the castle. Well, about halfway up the castle, I realized that I'd left my camera down at the park bench at the concession. So George and I walked back down the trail and got down there where I'd left the camera, and it was gone. But there was a piece of paper just loose right there. One of the wind hadn't blown it away, with some writing on it. And I took that over to Kid at the concession stand, and he could barely read German himself. He said, "It's something about an address and a camera." So I figured what it was. These people found the camera and was telling me so. Well, the town that was this address was a good ways away from where we were, but when we were going to be returning to the base the next day, it was going to be just a few short miles out of the way. We were in 2 cars. So on the way back, George and I took a detour over 6, 7 miles over this little German town to find this address and get my camera. It was a real cute little town, real small. And of course, you didn't have a GPS to find an address back then. Went to right to the center of this little town. It was like a town square, a little park area, and a big sign up in the middle of this park area was a painting on a big billboard like of the city. It was laid out, all the streets and everything, and it was very small. I'd guess it was a town of less than 1,000 people. But on this big billboard there in the park, well, you find the street where I had on this address. So it wasn't but just a few blocks away. We drove and we found this address. I remember now the street, the house was, gosh, it wasn't 15 feet from the street. I mean, it was a little picket fence with a little gate on it, and then 1 or 2 steps past the gate was the front door. I mean, it was this old house was a quaint little old house, right on the fence and right on the street. Well, George and I got out and go up and knock on the front door and knock, and nobody's there. So we figured, well, that's it. We got to go on. We can't stay around. And as I was walking away from the door, I said, "George, I hear some voices around the corner or something." And there was a little brick walkway around past the corner of the house, back to the side or back to the rear of the house. So we walked back, we was listening to them voices, walked back and got back there, and there was a side porch on his house, and there was three little old women in their, at least they're close to their 70s, all three of them sitting there in rocking chairs and knitting. And I couldn't say a word of German, they couldn't say a word of English, and I was trying to tell them camera, and then we wasn't communicating at all. And finally, I held up my cover. I had the lens cover to the camera with me, and the little old lady said, camera, camera," and I said, "Yeah." She goes in the house, comes out with my camera. I give her a big hug, and she hands me the camera, and I hand her 2 or 3 German bills. I don't know how much it was, but I had it in my hand for a reward. And we left. And on the way back to the car, I told George, I said, "That was so beautiful." I said, "And it's a shame that I didn't take my darn movie camera with me." And he said, "Well, let's just try it." This is the truth. I take my movie camera and my other camera that I'd lost, and we go back, and them old little women sitting there sewing, and I made motion with my hand, round and round like camera, you know. I showed her my movie camera, and right off, she understood what I wanted. She got up, she handed me those 2 or 3 bills back. I handed her my camera that she had found, and she goes back in the house. I start my movie camera. She comes out the door. I video her coming out, big smile and hugging, thanking her for the reward, and handed her the reward, and recorded every bit of it, and turned around and left. Oh, that's the truth. And in fact, telling this story now, I've got to get in the basement. I've got to find that tape. But we did do that. We reenacted it, and she understood it, and I got it all recorded on tape on the movies. I thought that was pretty unique.